My next guest is Dr. Torkil Færø. He has a book called The Pulse Cure, and we are going to be discussing wearables. So wearables are watches or rings that you put on your body that track your nervous system activity. And as a physician, he found this strong correlation between our current modern lifestyle and health or disease. So we are going to be discussing how wearables can help give us valuable information on what we need to shift on a daily basis to optimize health. And for those of you that are concerned about your bone health, our bones are the bank of our minerals and they run the show. So managing our daily stress and daily energy output is critical for bone health. Do you use wearables? Well, I have been nervous to try them. So my next podcast guest, Dr. Torkil Færø, is here to discuss how valuable they can be for giving us the information to determine if our lifestyle on a daily basis is supporting health or contributing to disease. So tune in and listen to this engaging conversation about how wearables can help us make better daily lifestyle choices that are actually going to support all facets of health and really support our bone health. Today on Stronger Bones Lifestyle Podcast, I am going to be speaking with Torkil. He is from Norway. He is a doctor. He's actually an emergency medicine physician, a documentarian, and a photographer. So welcome.
Thank you, Debbie. Very nice to be here.
Yes. So when your team reached out to my team, it was to discuss wearables or trackables for health. And then you and I had this discussion before we came on to see what are all the things we're going to talk about. I think today's going to be super interesting because I think you're going to give us some really great information on ways to track certain aspects of our health that are actually directly correlated to bone health.
Yes, we do. So there's so much to discuss, and we'll talk about wearables and heart rate and how we can use our heart rate, which is showing the state of the body. So maybe not directly the bones, but for example, it would show that the more sunlight you get, it's better for the heart rate, it's better for your overall health and including your bones. So lots of interesting stuff.
There is. Okay, so let's start though. Let's set the stage because I want them to know who you are. And I read your bio. You also have a book called The Pulse Cure. And I was reading a little bit about that. And so you actually participated in Doctors Without Borders in, was it Angola?
Angola, Africa. Yeah. So that's a lifetime ago. It was in 1996 as a young doctor. And originally I planned to just work like that, to be a kind of a war zone surgeon, and that will be what I was doing. And then, of course, life takes you other places, than your plans. But I think it was like 5 months, it was worth 10 years of experience. So of the value of it, so much to learn, so much to see from such a different viewpoint, the totally different global health situation from what I'm treating on a daily basis as a doctor here. So you could kind of see how health had historically been evolving. So, of course, most of the diseases that I saw there, like malnutrition and lots of infectious diseases and lots, of course, war injuries, of mine injuries and explosives and so on, I never see here. So here, of course, I see mostly the diseases that comes from a lifestyle that we are not really made to live. So we are exercising too little, we are eating food we cannot really tolerate well, we're drinking alcohol, using nicotine, we are sleeping too little. So there's so many things that is hurting our health and creating a state of inflammation in our bodies, which manifests itself in the different diseases in the different organs, including the brain. So the more we can live like they were living in Angola originally, the better off we will be when it comes to these kind of diseases. The trouble that they had in Angola with infectious diseases and so on, we have largely solved by vaccines and pure water and food that is not contaminated and antibiotics and so on. So what they died from, we have fixed, but what we died from, we're not really good as a healthcare system to treat, right? It's not the medicines we have, it's not really fixing the problem, in my mind.
It's so interesting, and I love this. I interview a lot of physicians on my podcast, and what I am noticing is that you go into medicine. I think that we're becoming more aware of how broken the whole system of medicine is. I don't know what it's like in Norway. I'm imagining similar. Really big pharma came in, I think. We kind of started to be so single focused, and we started to look for where is the one element in the body that something is going wrong with. And then we created a pill for that. And so then our studies that we're all hanging our hats on, we had to hold everything constant, which, this 70 trillion being that we are cannot be done. And we would look at this one factor, and the pill would actually, whatever it was we were monitoring, would take care of that issue. But really, it's lifestyle. All of the other components and every other facet of our body gets involved. And so we're kind of realizing this. And in the osteoporosis world, which is where I work, osteoporosis medications are the number one refused medication. And so the patient now is starting to say, wait a minute, I don't want to take a pill. And so then we have to look at what are the lifestyle factors that are contributing to the dysfunction or the disease in the body.
Yeah. And of course, in that department, using your body, using your muscles to build stronger bones, being outside in the sunlight, super important, making vitamin D and so on. So there's quite a lot you can do about getting stronger bones. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that, because you were saying that you're in Norway. So I was telling you my family's from Scotland. We were talking about the latitude at which my people grew up in, and you're at a higher elevation. And then you were talking about the research that you're doing, or the fascination you have now with sunlight exposure and bone health, because there's such a strong correlation there with that. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. One thing that you find quite quickly when you start monitoring your heart rate and using wearables is that sunlight and the summer is such a strong component of health. The heart rate variability, which is a measure of the state of our autonomic nervous system and our physiology, just peaks in the summer as a sign that we are healthier. And more people die in the winter at high latitudes than in the summer. It's a 25% difference. So I just got intrigued by what is it about sunshine and sunlight that is so powerful. And of course, probably also know in the US was one of the most famous doctors when it comes to sunlight, Dr. Roger Schultz, or he's from Loma Linda. So that's probably close to where you are. So there's so many doctors now being aware of the effects of the sunlight on our overall health. And then, of course, also on our bones. So you can see that the more sunlight you get, the stronger your bones are. So there's even research using tanning beds that show that, okay, the bone strength or bone mass density increases and so on. There's, funny enough, historically, one of the first persons to become aware of the effect of the sunlight was a ancient Greek, probably like 3,000 years ago or so. He was called Herodot. And he was traveling around the region, and he was in probably Persia, which is probably where close to Iran today, where he could see a lot of skeletons lying around. And he could see it in two parts. On one part, the skulls were really hard, and the losing part, they had their skulls cracked by just throwing a small stone at the skulls. And he just asked around, how come? How come they're so different? You have one part with really strong skulls, you cannot really break them, and the other ones breaks from nothing. And it was because the Egyptians, they had been shaving the heads all from they were small children, while the Persians were using some headwear all of their lives, So even the skull, structure was then affected by the sunlight that they were exposed to. So I find that really interesting, that we can do something that is free to get into the sunlight. And of course, now we know so much more about what kind of biological reactions happens in our body that makes the body stronger. It's just so interesting to learn more about this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Then I start to think like, wow, is it directly where the sun is shining that's going to make you stronger? If that's the case, we need to lay out naked because we want our pelvic area and our hip joints to be strong.
Yeah, I think it's both quite directly, but it's also just from the vitamin D, or vitamin D, maybe you say vitamin, comes from the sun exposure. Making vitamin D is, of course, important for your bone health. And the lower your vitamin D, the worse your bone health, right? So it's important for the structure. So it may be that, but it may be many other things, because the sunlight, or the infrared part of the sunlight, goes straight into the mitochondria inside your body. It goes through your clothes into your body, quite deep into your body, and is affecting the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cells, and making them more efficient, which would probably affect the cells that make up bone, like the osteoblasts and so on. So it could be many, many different things happening that helps the bones be stronger.
Yeah, so I've had skin cancer 4 times. I was born and raised in LA. I used to bake in the sun in the 80s on those aluminum mats with baby oil. It's terrible, but I have. So what my dermatologist has told me and what I've read is that it's safe probably to have 10 to 15 minutes of exposure without any sunscreen on. And they said especially on the torso, front and back, and the hands and the legs, or the arms and the legs.
Yeah, and the more sun you get, the more melanin you get, the more protection from the natural way, and the more time you can stay out in the sun. And actually, the kind of skin cancer that you get, usually from the sunlight, which is the basal cell carcinoma, or squamous cell carcinoma also, is associated with a longer life. Because you have been a longer time in the sun, you have more sun exposure, you will get those quite harmless skin cancers. They don't spread much. You don't really die from them. That's melanoma and the other kind of cancer that you usually die from. And a very good dermatologist, Dr. Richard Weller, he says kind of, congratulations, you got this skin cancer. You just increased your chances of living a longer life. So it's good for you.
Okay, that's a whole different perspective, because I think what it did is it actually, well, I go to the dermatologist now every 2 months, and I get frozen. They freeze things because I have precancerous spots on my face. And then I think, wait, I don't want to have things cut out. I just did actually have another one cut out of my back. And yeah, my first one was at 14. And so, although there's always been a correlation with hormones too, like in my life, which is, I don't know if that plays a role, but that was right around starting my period, right at perimenopause, and to menopause was another time where I had a couple. So I don't know if there's a correlation there hormonally also. I don't know that we know that.
It could be, and it's probably quite genetic, the cause. It could be genetically also. So there's a good doctor. He's on lots of podcasts. He's called Theo Suleimani. He's also a Californian skin doctor and a surgeon. He's also very interesting to listen to, I think.
Yeah, that's like amazing information. I think I've avoided the sun more than I should, and you're making me realize that I need to get back out there. My legs are so white, and our heritage, you and I were speaking, we're both from that same part of the world where there wasn't as much sun. And, as the, whatever we're going to call it, the climate changes or weather patterns shift, it's not quite as cold, I think, as it used to be in the world, right? I think my people really had a harder time, much harsher climate. And so I always thought it was because genetically I'm not designed for California. I'm designed for the winter.
Yeah, that's true. Because we became paler to catch the sunlight more efficiently as we needed it, as we moved more and more to the north. And although Scotland is a little bit south of many parts of Norway, it's still under the clouds so much more. There's less sunshine. And that is also the reason why if you are, for example, red-haired, like there would be more people in Scotland and the British Isles, you increase your chances of living longer by 8%. You live 8% longer under those sun-deprived circumstances than the others when you are red-haired and have that complexion. That advantage disappears if everybody gets more sunlight. So it's kind of the advantage under these sun-deprived conditions.
Wow. Yeah, that's
8% is like 5 years, it's a long time.
Yeah, well, my dad is 96. I do have a lot of longevity in my family, but I'm going for the quality of life. For me, I don't care what age I am. I just want to make sure it's amazing.
That is usually the same. So whatever, and that is the advice in the Pulse Cure in the book. So that is generally the advice that you need to follow to live a long life. But the same advice is also what is good for your well-being and your health in the moment. Of course, it's the same thing. So whatever makes you live shorter, is also creating disease in your life. And the good thing is that whatever you do that is good for you is revealed in the heart rate. Of course, as a doctor, the first thing I look at when a patient comes into the ER is the blood pressure, the heart rate, the temperature, the oxygen level. And this is what the modern wearables track, and through the algorithms developed from millions of users and artificial intelligence interpreting this and giving you the result on your phone, it's just such an important tool that you can keep track of your health and you have control instead of leaving that control up to the doctor that you pay a lot of money to see, maybe every 4 months or 6 months or every year or whatever. You have the control in real time. And when you see this and you have this heart rate as almost like the speedometer in your car, it tells you so much about the state of your body that you can use to navigate the health. So these are the really, really great tools that is coming out now. And so many people are using it, of course. At least in Norway, more than half of the people use some kind of smartwatch or tool or ring or activity band. And there's so much competition. And what is nice for me, I think, is that I'm used to as a doctor that all the money is on the backside of disease. After you get sick, that is when we step in and do something. But this is a tool with money involved that can help you not to get sick. So I think it's a quite huge change, actually.
So when you say money involved, you mean like if this is preventative upfront, you pay for these devices and that can help you prevent disease.
There's money in the business of helping you prevent disease, which is a good thing, right?
It's a good thing. I've always wondered why don't they get that? Like whenever I think about the system as it is, that we're not preventing disease, and I think it would be so much more.
No, it's economical for the state, but for the industry, it's horrible because everything that will help you stay healthy is free. Breathwork, nature, eating real food, staying away from alcohol or minimizing it, moving, sleeping well, making sure that you are resting enough, sunlight, all of this is free. So you cannot monetize on that. And that is the problem. So, but also, and fasting, for example, is even cheaper, of course, than the alternative.
Okay, so let's talk about wearables. So before we talk about wearables, I just want to say that I don't use them because I've been skeptical about the communication aspect of it, whether it's Bluetooth. I don't understand it. So that's what I'm going to say is I don't understand it. My kids are all into it. I know people are. And that's why I was so happy to have you come and speak with us because I want you to explain. And you just kind of did. You just said something that was really amazing. That when you go to a doctor to get a checkup, a tune-up, the first thing you're looking at is what all these devices are actually monitoring. So can you explain the devices, like what you think are the best devices or what devices matter? What should we do? If you're going to do the first one, what should you do? If you were going to do multiple, what should you do?
Yeah, and firstly, because you were a bit worried about the EMF and the signal from Bluetooth and so on, and you can put these into flight mode. So like my Garmin watch and my Oura Ring and probably my Whoop band as well, I can put it into the flight mode and they will just register just using light to measure the heart rate and just sending light back and forth. And then when you transfer the information from the device to your phone, okay, you can leave the room and just do that, once a day or so. So there is a way that you can do it and still be sure that there would not be no EMF trouble there. But these devices, they can use the heart rate and they use an even better way of monitoring the heart rate, which is called heart rate variability. And that shows the state of your autonomic nervous system, whether you are in the sympathetic stressful part or in the parasympathetic restful part. And of course, we need to rest. We need to be able to recover. And that is what happens. The recovery state is the parasympathetic state. And luck has it that the heart rate will behave differently whether you are in the parasympathetic state or the sympathetic state. In the parasympathetic state, when we breathe in and fill our lungs with oxygen, the heart rate speeds up a little bit, measured in milliseconds. So hardly detectable for yourself. And then when you breathe out and you have less oxygen in the lungs, you don't empty them, but there is less oxygen, the heart rate slows down a little bit. It's like it's to save some energy now that there's less oxygen in the lungs. And you can detect that. And when you are in the stressful state, it's like the system gathers that, okay, this organism needs to survive this moment because we don't know if it will survive the next situation, the stressful situation, because this system is ancient. We're talking about like 100, 200 million years old or even older system that we share with all vertebrates, all mammals. We have the same basic system, the foundation of our nervous system. And the heart rate variability then kind of puts a needle straight into this measurement. So it's just like you have a needle on your speedometer, seeing the intensity of your life. And it can then, through comparing it to all these millions of people, can tell you whether your stress balance is sustainable and compatible with health. And for so many people, it's not. And for most people, they will see that what stresses them is not the traditional stress or mental stress or that you're nervous or have some kind of issue. It can be food. It will be alcohol. Alcohol is the worst stressor of all. And that is what I use to calm myself down, right? And I know many people use that. And to monitor your exercise, of course, you can see whether your sleep is good enough or maybe there's something disturbing your sleep. Maybe you are in the perimenopause or menopause and you can see that, okay, there's so much stress here. Maybe you need some hormone replacement therapy. And for women in the fertile age, you can see that the week before menstruation is a real physiological load. So it's not just a feeling that you feel down, you feel tired and have a lot of symptoms. It's a physiological load. And I can see on the heart rate variability that is just as hard as a strong COVID infection or a strong flu. And of course, if you then as a woman has that for 1 week every month or every 4 weeks, it's quite a big strain. And when you see that on your monitor, you're able to mitigate the stress. You're able to stay away from the comfort foods like chocolate that you may, or sugary stuff that you may think that was useful for you. But when you see that it really stresses you way into the night. For example, me and my wife this weekend, we were at a family, we call it confirmation. It's when you're 15, you go to church and you get confirmed your baptism or so. And there's lots of cakes, good food, and you eat cake like just before you go to bed. And that will keep your stress high until maybe 5, 6 in the morning. And I would never think that. I would never earlier have been thinking that that would have anything to do with my stress levels. So, but once you get these results from your heart rate monitor, you can identify things that saps you of your forces without you even knowing about it.
So this is a constant monitoring of sympathetic and parasympathetic stimulation?
Yeah. So they will keep track of it. So, but you don't really need to look at it. Like, for example, today, I probably haven't really looked at it. So I've been exercising today, and I can see from my Garmin watch, for example, that my body battery is 22, which is a good value in the evening. So the body battery system with the Garmin watches are both the cheapest and the best option, I would say, for most people. And one of the good things is that it gives you this estimate of your available physiological forces in the body battery system, which is, of course, easy to understand. That if you have been recovering well during the night, then your body battery is high in the morning, maybe 80 or even above. 80 is good enough, I would say. And then, of course, throughout the day, you can see that you are using your forces as you should do, right? You cannot save your physiological energy and build up like a huge fortune. You generally build up the forces that you need the next day, right? And then your body battery shouldn't go below 20, I would say, on most days. So this is how you get this speedometer, just like you have the dashboard in your car that you really appreciate, right? Instead of running out of gas and breaking the speed limits and seeing that your engine overheats, you want those numbers. You want to see those results on your dashboard. And it's even more important to see these results when it comes to your health. So it's kind of, you get a glimpse into what goes on under the hood, because we are not really equipped from nature's side to be aware of this. We have excellent senses from outward threats, excellent eyesight, hearing, sense of smell and touch and taste and so on, because until now, and even like in Angola, the threats to their lives came from the outside. The threat to our lives comes from the inside, from too much stress in a physiological and mental sense, with too little capacity to deal with it from our immune system. And this is a way then to get kind of a substitute for this sense that we never needed to develop, I would say.
Yeah, it's so intriguing. You were talking about light, that if I do it on Bluetooth, like you're really making me think I need to want something. So you said the Garmin watch would be the least expensive, and then you have a Whoop and you have an Oura Ring.
That's
and
right.
You were saying that it was light. I'm still trying to understand that.
They are shining, you can probably see here, they're just shining green light onto your artery and just measuring and then taking a signal back somehow. I don't really know how they do it. And then they measure your heart rate, just as you do if you go to the doctor. We put this thing on your finger, right, to see your heart rate and to see the level of oxygen. And that is what we do on every patient that comes into my office. Or they go to the nurses first, and of course they check this. But here you have it, on your wrist. And then paying attention. So while you're living your life, having your attention elsewhere on the life you're living, these monitors keep track of the intensity of your life. And you can see, and for many people, it's too much. They are not necessarily stressing too much, but they are often recovering too little. So you need to find this balance between pushing yourself, both physiologically and mentally, but then recovering from it to build yourself stronger. And if you don't know what is stress and what is recovery phase, then of course it's really hard to see. It's just like, I call it in the Pulse Care in the book, I call it the body budget. So it's just like, if in your personal economy, you don't know your wages, if you go to the supermarket, you have no idea what things cost. You fill the car with gas, you don't know the price. You're kind of blind. It would be very hard to get control of your personal economy if those were the circumstances. But in our physiological economy, in our personal physiological economy, that is how most people live. They are overstraining themselves compared to their capacity without them even knowing about it. And when they get to know it, and they're able to navigate this and get their stress in balance, so many symptoms disappear. And I'm sure probably in the US, just like in Norway, so many people, particularly women, get into a fatigue situation. They get brain fog, they get digestional problems, they feel tired, problem concentrating, problems with memory and so on, stressed out. And you would not be in that situation without these different devices telling you a long time before that this is not good. You need to rest more. So, yeah.
Okay, so here's where I see this in the bone world, because you're making me really think. So our bones are the storage of minerals. Our bones are the bank. Our bones are one of the first organ systems to respond to stress. People don't realize that. But when your body needs to prepare to run, to flee, like physiologically what it needs, you need your big mover muscles to get all that blood. If you have that pH balance, it's so intricate, 734 or 735 to 745. That's minerals play such an important role, right? The bones are going to dissolve the alkalizing minerals if you get too acidic. And stress is acidic. There's a lot of things that put us into that zone. So this monitoring for women and, my population, let's say 50 plus, we don't, when you're using the word stress here, we're thinking about we need to build stronger muscles for stronger bones. So we need the energy to be able to move our bodies appropriately to build that lean skeletal muscle, because stronger muscles have stronger bones. The other thing is the word stress that you're using. I don't think people think of this as much, but stress can be subconscious. And when you are watching something scary or unpleasant or having a conversation that is triggering or fear-based or scarcity-based, the two triggers of the nervous system are fear and scarcity. So whenever you're subjected to that, to what you're taking in from a sensory component, what you're watching, what you're listening to, what you're participating in. So these wearables could actually help us monitor our bone bank account in a way, because then we could preserve that. We could think about it from that perspective. Do I have enough energy, or like your budget that you're talking about? Do I have enough energy to do what I need to do today to develop that lean skeletal muscle, to have stronger bones? Do I have enough today? Did I sleep well enough for that? I mean, there's a lot here that could be very beneficial for women monitoring the status of the bone dissolving and building throughout the day. Building, dissolving, building, dissolving. So this is, I'm going to get one of these devices now.
Yeah. Of course, I would recommend that. And it's probably also because when you are spending your energy on stress and inflammation, there's less energy to build bones and for the body to do what it's made for. You kind of distracting all the energy towards dealing with the inflammation of milk or gluten, for example. That is some of the big troubles when it comes to food, for example. So I think it could very well be an indirect measurement of the state of the bones. And I haven't checked that, but probably you could see that there's a difference in heart rate variability compared to osteoporosis. Usually I can Google more or less any kind of disease and then add heart rate variability, and I would find research showing that there's a connection here. I haven't done that. Maybe I should have done that before this podcast if I was a little bit more, alert. But probably it could be interesting to Google that or ask ChatGPT if there's a connection between heart rate variability and osteoporosis.
Well,
I suspect so, yeah.
I would suspect so. Okay, so I definitely want to talk about the dairy and gluten because you brought that up. But before we get to that, there was something else. We'll talk about the sleep monitoring. So will you remind me that at the end I want to talk about the sleep monitoring? But for now, let's talk about what you just said with dairy and gluten. So just to set the stage on this, as a functional health coach, my main program is called Healthy Gut, Healthy Bones. So my goal is to optimize digestion, absorption, and assimilation of bone-building nutrients, and also not to trigger inflammation. And you were just saying that the energy the body needs to run inflammation. So what I think we're coming to realize in my platform to share this information is that osteoporosis is a metabolic inflammatory disease. It is not a progressive degenerative, you're getting older, you're going to have osteoporosis. There is a strong metabolic inflammatory component. And you were speaking earlier about heart rate variability and food sensitivities. And so I would love to discuss that because you just talked, I tell everyone that sugar, dairy, and gluten are no-nos. I say gluten's the worst, but you might have other information for us. Can you explain what you just said about those two triggers, especially dairy and gluten? Because every woman thinks they need to eat their yogurt for protein, calcium, and probiotics. And they're eating yogurt every day, and they're drinking their milk and eating their cheese. So can you please talk about that and how wearables can help us identify if we are reactive or not?
Yeah, so many people see that when they start tracking their heart rate variability, they can see that the foods are really affecting their stress levels. And I think the first time I became aware of this was at the lunchtime on my job, where I usually would have a salad. And then at this certain day, there was kind of probably a celebration. Maybe somebody had their birthday or something. It was a huge cake. And I decided, okay, instead of going for the salad, I can just have 2 big slices of cake. And that just sent my system into overdrive and raising my heart rate by like 15, probably from 60 in resting heart rate to maybe 75 for hours, maybe 5-6 hours afterwards. And that was the first surprise I got. But I could see then that this repeated itself so many times. So I understood that I should not eat bakery goods, and cakes would be a certain amount of stress, for example. And in the end, I took a test checking for peptides and so in my urine, and it proved that there was some casein, and this endorphins that comes from, it was some gluten, and it showed that I was sensitive at least to gluten and milk. Not so much that it showed on the IgG on my blood, but it showed in the urine. So I could see that, okay, I need to eat less of this. And I can see that. So if I am under a lot of stress, I can go for a Caesar salad, for example. Then I know that this is not very stressful for me if I have, multiple lectures on a day or, having stressful times. And I know that this is what most people find. So, and particularly if you combine it with sugar, and if you combine it with ultra-processed food, this hyper-palatable food that you cannot stop eating before you have emptied the whole bag kind of stuff, that is a lot of stress. And it could last for hours. And so where maybe you used to think that, okay, you're lying on the couch watching Netflix and eating some candy and stuff, and you think you're relaxing, then the heart rate shows that you're absolutely not relaxing. This is really tough for your body. And it's tough for your digestional system, where you probably also know that 70% of the immune system is organized around the intestinal system, because that is where the war is, that all the different food stuff that you put down your throat has to be, comes down to small molecules that has to be checked by the immune system. Is this safe or not? Should we react to this particular substance or not? And then most of the things that we eat is, of course, in these days, in the ultra-processed food, it's not really food. It's a food-like substance that some people prefer to call it. So I think most people using these heart rate monitors, they go back to the food that your great-grandmother used to make or recognize as food. So that is a good sign that it could be good for you.
Yeah. If we think of ourselves as 2-year-olds, and we think about how would we prepare a 2-year-old for sleep at night. And, we know innately that we shouldn't feed that child. We should not be bouncing and doing crazy activity. We shouldn't be participating in anything stimulating, right? Yet for ourselves, you just gave me this visual of there we are on the sofa. What are we watching? How stimulatory is that to our nervous system? Our nervous system doesn't know the difference between real or perceived danger. And so your senses are taking in this information. You might also be eating. And when we are in a stress state, our digestive system is not stimulated. The blood gets diverted. That's a parasympathetic activity, right? So when the sympathetic branch is stimulated, you now have the action going there. So you're not properly digesting that food, which then maybe your stomach has to deal with a few hours later, which is going to disrupt sleep. It's crazy if you just think about your being laying there on that sofa, and what are you doing to your beautiful being? What are you putting in it in your mouth? What are you putting in it in your eyes, in your ears? And we don't think of ourselves that way. And maybe that's part of what all these wearables do. They actually say, hey, look at what's happening in a way that I always say that we forgot as humans. You just said what the food our grandmothers used to eat. we really have forgot how to live harmoniously with nature. And you mentioned before we came on here, you work with the diseases of wealth, right? The more money we have, the better food, or so we think it's better. The more the TV we can have that's bigger, that's louder, the surround sound and all of that. And we've just forgotten that we are these precious soul beings that are constantly on alert to keep us safe and alive. And what are we doing? And maybe that is really the beauty of these devices. They're going to kind of make us stop and smell the coffee.
Yeah, they do. And they point towards the lifestyle of our ancestors in many, many ways. In movement, in sleep. And you say, talk about sleep. That's probably the most important thing. And it's the first chapter in the book also, because once you fix or improve your sleep, then you get more energy to deal with the things that require more willpower and more effort, like movement and making food from the base up and so on. So, and to get better sleep, then you need to dim the lights in the evening, maybe a couple of hours before you go to sleep. You need to not eat maybe 3 hours. That should be the last meal before you go to sleep. You need your bedroom to be cool, maybe 15, or in Fahrenheit, it will be 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, for example. And it would be very helpful to go to sleep and wake up at the same time, more or less every day, so that you have a good sleep consistency. And your bedroom should be really dark. I know that like 40% of Americans, and probably all over the world, maybe have lights on in the bedroom. So your bedroom should be as dark so that you cannot see a hand in front of you when you put out the lights. So there's a lot of these tricks that can help you. And of course, not drinking caffeine after noon the day before, or the same day then. That will really affect your sleep also. So
yeah, one thing though that I wonder about these, so since I have not worn them, I talk to people who do. My kids are really into them. My son is very into the Whoop, and I know that you have that one. But they also have the Oura Ring, and they have the iWatch. Is it called the iWatch? What's the
yeah, probably Apple Watch. Apple Watch.
Watch.
Yeah.
So one thing I wonder though, because then I hear them saying, "Oh no, I only got blank a month. I only was in this much deep sleep," and blah blah. Sometimes I wonder, because I feel like I sleep really, like I prioritize sleep. I wear a black or a dark t-shirt over my eyes, and I cover the spaces so that I can't see anything. Even if a little tiny light comes through, I push it. I wear earplugs in my ears. I don't watch stimulatory stuff before bed. Like I need that. I take a shower before I go to sleep. I do try to keep it cool. But I hear my kids, or mostly my kids or their friends, talk about, oh, I only got blank amount of this much sleep. And sometimes I wonder, does it cause more anxiety that you didn't sleep enough? So sometimes the sleep part of it anyway.
Yeah, it probably could. And I'm not sure if the sleep phases are accurate enough to be, using it in that way. It's kind of maybe just points to something. You cannot use it accurately as that, I think. But if it's really poor, it just tells you, it's just like the dashboard in your car. It just tells you your speed, how much is left. It's just reality check. And if you see that your sleep is subpar, if it's really bad, then it's a problem. You need to, and you need to fix it. If you put the watch or device away, the problem will not go away. So it's just like if you come to me at the ER and you have a fever, and I just say, just throw away the temperature gauge, it doesn't, it's a thermometer, it doesn't solve the problem. You still have the fever, you're still sick. So, but of course, if you don't know what to do, then it becomes a problem. And for some reason, the Pulse Cure, I think, is one of maybe 2 or 3 books. I think the other ones are self-published about how to use wearables when connected to lifestyle strategies. So, of course, that they would see that there's trouble, their sleep is not good enough, and they wouldn't necessarily know what to do. They wouldn't necessarily know that you shouldn't eat before you go to bed. You need those 3 hours. You shouldn't exercise either hard in 3 hours before you go to bed. So you may be doing a lot of things, eating the wrong food that you didn't know affected your sleep. So you kind of need the guide or guidebook to show you what to do if you find that your sleep is not good enough.
Right. What to do. So the Pulse Cure yearbook, you talk about different wearables. Like, do you have your favorites? You have three of them.
Yes, usually those three, and then there are many others as well. But Garmin is really in a league of its own. So, but most smartwatches would have, a health function that will be pros and cons from all of them. For example, if you have the Whoop, the advantage is that you don't have a screen. You don't see your heart rate if that is too invasive for you or you get disturbed by it. You get a recovery score in the morning, and you can track your exercises and so on. And it will, with artificial intelligence, it will give you kind of an exercise program and sleep program, on what to do. It will give you advice. So, and often, of course, you can put screenshots from your phone of the results that you find and put them into ChatGPT and get advice. And they're actually quite good. Technology that is really creating lots of problems, of course, can also solve them in many ways.
I've heard that. I've heard that AI in the medical field can be beneficial. So if someone were going to venture into this world and the first one that they were going to buy, what would you recommend?
I would just buy the cheapest Garmin one, which probably would be $465. But most of them are fine. Women may want to choose some more feminine way, or the ones that they think look better, right? That may be a little bit more expensive. But in general, all the Garmin watches are good enough.
All right.
So, and that should cost maybe $250, $250. So it's not so expensive. And if you find out that this wasn't for me, then just pass it on or sell it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and maybe even I don't know if you could buy them used when you were saying that, but yeah, so we need to monitor. This is a way to monitor from a preventative perspective, the speed at which your body is operating throughout the day. What is your budget, your energy budget? What are you being triggered by, whether that's food, activities? And then, there's just a lot of great information here to optimize health. And then I'm going to say at the deepest layer inside of us, your bone bank can stay full when you are monitoring these, because that's where we're going to keep withdrawing if we are not monitoring this. All right. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share?
No, I think we've been through quite a lot. So I think we've been through it all, more or less. Not at all. Of course, I could talk for hours about these things, but yeah.
Well, here's what I want to say. Thank you, because, we go to doctors. Doctors are there to help us. I want to say heal us. I want to say cure us. And I think for a long time, when we were closer to being our grandmothers in our lifestyle, we weren't as sick. And maybe it was easier to be taken care of, but we've gone so far away from what our natural state that we are more sick than ever. Our diseases are accelerated. And for those of us females that are post-menopause, bone health becomes so paramount. And maybe that's where we focus our energy. There's other things that can go wrong as well, but just being aware of our health. And so for a doctor to be recommending self-tracking, wearables, and lifestyle for prevention is amazing. So I want to say thank you for the work that you do around the world. Your book, The Pulse Cure, the runaway Scandinavian bestseller.
It's been this incredible bestseller here in Norway. So I think it translates, it's about 1% of the population have bought it. So it's like in the US that it would have sold like 3 million copies, So it just turned my life totally around, And then it's been translated into 9 languages. It's being translated into Chinese as we speak. So it's been this, and I'm usually just a normal doctor, right? Working one-on-one with patients, and then wrote this book, and then suddenly everything changed. So now I certainly have to watch my stress levels. That's for sure.
You do. And thank you. I mean, thank you for doing that. And that's what's happening. And that's who I seem to want to share with the world is the doctors that are promoting lifestyle medicine and functional medicine. So thank you so much for what you do. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Debi. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on Stronger Bones Lifestyle. Are you ready to take charge of your future? For show notes, resources, and information on my programs, please visit DebiRobinson.com. If today's episode empowered you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs it. Together, we're building stronger bones and stronger lives. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.